This is National Preparedness Month, and the Clark County Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security is pleased to be making presentations all around the community to groups like yours as well as the community in general at public events. And so thank you so much for joining us today and your time and attention, and to those in the remote areas. I hope you can hear me, and if you can just speak up if you can't hear me and if you need additional time to look at slides or whatever. My name is Irene Navis, and I'm the Planning Coordinator and Assistant Emergency Manager for the Clark County Fire Department Office of Emergency Management. I've been with the county about 28.5 years in various capacities, including the last 6 years with the Office of Emergency Management. And I'm pleased to be talking to you about various aspects of emergency preparedness today, including that it's the key. It really is the key to being able to survive a serious incident in the community or within your household or your neighborhood. And it is definitely the key to recovery. The more prepared you are at the outset, before an incident happens, the more you're able to survive through it and come out the other side and recover as wholly as possible. So I have a short video for you. I hope it works. Doesn't look like it's going to. It's a preparedness video. I don't know why it's not showing up there. But essentially, what we're going to talk about is preparedness in different types of emergencies, the types of incidents that we have within the community. If you want to know more about preparedness and go in depth to talk about preparedness in the different types of emergencies, the ready.gov website for FEMA has all kinds of written information similar to what's being passed around to you this afternoon, and also these videos. So the preparedness video that I was trying to show you has to do with family preparedness. So if you just Google in your computer ready.gov family preparedness, that video will pop up and you'll be able to see it at your convenience. So we talk about preparedness not only for individuals in the community, but businesses, community organizations, people who are children, elderly folks, and everybody in between. Also our pets and our service animals, very, very important to engage in preparedness for them as well. So what are the types of emergencies do you think that we most get ready for here in Southern Nevada? Any ideas? Drought, absolutely. We're about in year 10 of a sustained drought, and that certainly factors into what we do for preparedness. What other hazards do you think we deal with here? Yes, floods, absolutely. What else? Another big one for us is wildfires, chemical emergencies. You know, we have railroad tracks coming through our community. We have trucks with various chemicals coming through our community. One of the things that a lot of folks don't know is that we are the third most seismic state in the country after Alaska and California. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more later. So when we talk about natural hazards, those are the more of the environmental and natural hazards that happen just in the course of living on this planet. Anything that's a natural disaster can happen. We have man-made events as well that have to do with an intentional or accidental cause of a severe threat to public health and well-being. So that could be an intentional release of a biological agent or an accidental chemical or hazardous material spill. In terms of technological, we hear more and more about cyber attacks and what can happen to computer systems, either in your home or in your work environment. And a lot of that has to do with support for critical infrastructure. There's not a transportation system, a hospital system, a government system that does not rely heavily on robust computer systems and making sure that those are safe. So that's another area of focus that we have. So the top hazards for Clark County: extreme weather, as someone mentioned, which includes drought. Wildfire, earthquakes, pandemics, and hazardous materials all come into play. And I was going to try and show you a second video here that does not seem to. That doesn't want to play either. So we'll move on to damage to critical infrastructure. The earthquake video that I was going to show you is a historic timeline of earthquakes from the 1800s all the way till today, and it's this fantastic map from the U.S. Geological Survey. That's another thing you can look at online at your convenience. And it just shows a timeline and one earthquake after another, counting about 220,000 earthquakes between the mid-1800s and today. In fact, just this year so far in Nevada, we have had about 6,600 earthquakes, ranging from 1.5 to about 3.5. Because Nevada is so vast and so much of it is open public land, most people don't feel them, but on occasion, you may feel a little bit of a tremble. Last pretty large one that we had was 1991, was a 5.5 earthquake out near Yucca Flats in Nye County, and was actually felt on the Las Vegas Strip and in downtown Las Vegas. And all the way to my house at the time, which was Boulder Highway in Tropicana. We actually felt our house moving. So they can cause a lot of issues in the community. Has anybody lived through an earthquake here in California, anywhere? Yes? Yes. So you know what the devastation can be. You know what it can do to literally rattle a community, and preparedness is so very important. One of the reasons we are focused on earthquake is we know that that would be probably the most prolonged damage and the most significant damage in our community if we had anything from a 6.0 and above earthquake in the community. So not only would it impact our residential areas, but also our critical infrastructure, such as, think about whether ambulances and other public safety equipment would be able to get to your neighborhood if it was destroyed. Think about police and fire protection, being able to reach areas of the community that might be damaged. Telephones and internet and power and water may be the first systems that are impacted. And then, of course, the influx of supplies to the community, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. The things that come in by rail and by truck. If our roadways are damaged, if our railroads are damaged, how will supplies from other areas come to us? We don't have a whole lot of manufacturing here in the Las Vegas area, and so how would we produce the things that we need over a period of time? So one of the things that people may or may not realize is we don't grow a whole lot of food in the area of Las Vegas. Most of our supplies come from other places. We have a maximum of about a 3-day food supply in the major grocery stores and other areas where you could find food. The main fuel line that comes from California could be compromised. A lot of those pipelines underground, they follow along the same routes as our transportation routes, along I-15, along the railroad tracks, all kind of in that same corridor. So if that area is damaged, very likely that our fuel pipelines would be damaged. So that would compromise not only gasoline, but also diesel fuel, airline fuel, so the airport would run out of fuel in 2 to 3 days. The major airport, McCarran Airport, Nellis Air Force Base has some, obviously lots of fuel stored, but lots of fuel need as well. So also realizing that government assistance may not be immediate. We may have to be on our own for anywhere from 72 hours to 10 days. FEMA recommends that in your household you prepare for at least a 72-hour period without assistance. So what does this mean? It means we have to plan. But folks like former President Eisenhower have said things like, I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean don't ever plan. It means if you do go through a planning process, make one that is useful to you and that you practice. Because just writing down a plan and putting it on a shelf and never looking at it again does not help you. You have to be familiar with it. Everyone in your household needs to be familiar with it. And it's something that becomes part of your consciousness and how you live your life, to be always prepared for what could possibly happen. So another great thing that you can do within your household or within your place of employment is to create a plan and build a kit based on that plan for your family. So if you have a 4-member household and one of your family members is a small child and one is grandma or grandpa, and you have to take care of kind of both ends of the spectrum, make sure you have things like an extra supply of diapers in the house and formula and anything that you would need to take care of that baby for more than 2 or 3 days. Same with elderly folks who have medication needs, or maybe they're on oxygen, or maybe they have some other mobility requirement where they would need extra assistance during an emergency. And the kit needs to have in it all those things that you might need in the course of living your daily life for a number of days without the opportunity to go to the store. And the store may be open, but maybe their cash registers aren't working because the electricity's down. Maybe they can't accept credit cards and that's all you have. Maybe the ATM machine isn't working. So think about, what do you have on hand to be able to do emergency purchases and have things on hand during an emergency. In your planning process, you also want to consider, what about your neighbors? Do you have an elderly neighbor that lives alone, or someone that might need extra assistance? What are some of their skills that they have? Maybe one of your neighbors is an electrician and he can help you get your power back up and running for you. Maybe somebody's a handyman and they can help. Maybe they have equipment that can help remove debris from in front of your house. Maybe you have a ham operator in your neighborhood, radio operator, or maybe you are one and can help participate in that response. Think about what cross streets you're at. How could you get out of town if you needed to? The county does not pre-establish designated evacuation routes. We have some pretty obvious roadways where people would need to get out, and the problem is we have very few. We have too few roadways to accommodate 2 million residents plus another 250,000 visitors that might be here. So think about how you might create an evacuation route to what would be your nearest shelter. Shelters are typically middle schools and high schools or community centers. So think about places like that, or the larger shelters that we might open up at Cashman Field, or at the convention center. So think about where you are in proximity to some of these resources so that you would know how to get there during an emergency. Think about a predetermined meeting spot. This is helpful even if you have a fire in your house, to make sure everybody gets out of your house and you meet at a particular street corner or in front of another neighbor's house. Make sure everybody in your household knows so that you can reunite there. And think about all of your community resources that you might be near. I mentioned some of them. Are there grocery stores that you can get to on foot? Is there a convenience market nearby? Is there a police or fire station nearby that you could go seek help in an emergency? So know your neighborhood. There are some great, helpful tools on, if you have a smartphone. You can also do this by computer, but on your smartphone, you can get apps from the Apple Store, from the Red Cross, that would tell you where shelters are, for example. So during an emergency, once they activate a number of shelters, they will put that information both on their website and also in this app, so that you'd be able to find, by putting your zip code in, where the nearest shelter is. We also have an app called the Southern Nevada Community Preparedness app, and it's a free app that you can download onto your phone that helps you do this planning that we're talking about today. It can help you design a grocery list for what you might need to purchase in your home, and also how to do an evacuation plan for your home to get out of your house safely and to find that safe spot in front of your house, and also what to put in your kit and the different elements of your personal preparedness plan. So there are a number of pretty new cool tools and resources out there. You can also do it the old-fashioned way on pen and paper, or on a computer in a paper version. But the important thing is for everybody to know what's in that plan and to use it. So let's talk about some specifics in terms of water. So think about this. Do you have enough water on hand to last 3 days or even 10 days? Do you know how to shut off your water to your residence? That may be important for safety purposes, especially if water lines happen to break during an emergency. Do you know when and how to obtain water if your supply becomes compromised? A lot of people don't know that you can actually use the water from your water heater in an emergency. You can use it for washing dishes. You can also boil it and use it for drinking water. So that may not sound very appetizing or appealing, but it is perfectly safe to drink the water out of your hot water heater. A lot of people ask me about swimming pool water. Unless you have an amazing water purification system and one of these water purification tanks that you can buy from one of the big box stores or from a survival type website, I would not chance drinking pool water. You might want to use it for cleaning yourself off or for washing dishes, but I certainly wouldn't be ingesting it in large amounts. So 1 gallon of water per person per day and per pet per day. Okay, if you have 2 hamsters, I don't think you need to worry about a gallon of water per day for your hamster, but if you have a large dog or a medium-sized dog or several dogs, you want to make sure that you have plenty of water for them, because one thing that is very, very dangerous for a small animal is to become dehydrated. So you don't want to have to be dealing with getting to a vet or getting to a shelter for your animal if you don't need to. So in terms of food, so do an inventory of your pantry if you have one. Will the food that you have last any particular length of time in an emergency? We all know that perishable food items don't last very long, especially without refrigeration. What type of food do you have in your pantry? Do you have sufficient canned goods and bottled goods and dried goods that would be able to carry you through an emergency? Think about, you may not have your stove. You may not have electricity. You may not have your oven. You may not be able to use your microwave. So what can you do without those things and have nutritious meals for a few days to get you through? One of the things we always recommend is don't buy a bunch of stuff on sale because it looks like it might be useful in an emergency and it's not food you would otherwise eat. If you hate sardines and tuna and navy beans, do not buy that for your emergency kit. Buy the things that you would really like to eat and can eat and are non-perishable. Make sure you have a hand can opener, because your electric can opener may not work during an emergency. So have one and have a spare, because they always break. I don't know why, but they always break. I haven't found a good one yet in probably 20 years. So always have things on hand that you can do manually and don't need any kind of power or electricity or hot water. I was watching TV the other day. I was flipping through channels and I came across the Home Shopping Network. They were doing a special on emergency preparedness for Preparedness Month, and they have a whole line of home goods, of food goods for emergency purposes. And these are sort of dehydrated food items that have been created by a chef and a scientist to package them so the food doesn't spoil and so the food actually tastes like something other than sawdust when you mix it with either cold water, warm water, or hot water. And it will work either way. And the special that they had going was $99.95 for 140 meals, which you can use in any type of emergency, or if you have maybe a person who is elderly that lives alone who maybe can't get out to the grocery store very often, and so in an emergency situation might need it. People become unemployed or whatever, could use it. So for a variety of purposes, but so an alternative for you to consider, and if you don't have a lot of space especially, they showed how you could put it in a kind of a box container and slide it under your bed at a minimum. Yes. Yes, sir.
So on the subject of emergency food, do you have any thoughts on freeze-dried stuff like what you're talking about, or dehydrated versus canned food or MREs in terms of how it affects the balance of how much water you need? Like, don't you, I guess, because you would have to add water or use some of your water to reconstitute.
Absolutely, and that's why they recommend to have so much extra water, because there's so many uses that you need for it. And so things like using your water heater for things besides food preparation or drinking water are a good idea, so that you can save some of the other bottled water or water in a special tank that you might purchase. There are all different sizes of those that you can store water in metal containers so that the water lasts longer. So you could get a 20-gallon or a 30-gallon if you have the space. One of the things that we caution about bottled water like this is over a very short period of time, maybe 3 or 4 months, especially if you keep it in a warmer area like a garage, the plastic will leach into the water and it could harm you. Especially if you have an immune system issue or some kind of illness where your stomach isn't the strongest, you could really have some problems. We had a boil water order in Laughlin last summer where people were without fresh tap water for about 3 days. And the only person that got sick in the whole community, and she was an elderly lady, about 85 years old, is she had some old water in her closet that had been sitting there for 6 months. And she drank several bottles and it made her sick. So just keep aware of that. Switch your water out about every 2 or 3 months. Switch your food out every so often. Don't buy a bunch of food on sale that has a shelf life of just a few months. Try and look for a long shelf life and switch it out. So if you put peanut butter in your emergency supply kit, use it and buy more, and use it and buy more, and just rotate it through so that you're not constantly on the verge of having food that isn't useful. But the water issue, this format that I was telling you about from Home Shopping Network uses very little water in order to reconstitute the food.
And about the danger of bottled water, I hadn't been aware of that. What about, those 5-gallon tanks that go on top of a water machine? Are those any better? I mean,
yes, those would be okay. Because of what they're made out of, and they are made for longer term use. And really, if you had one sitting there for years, probably not the best idea, but it would last longer then. It's just because these are so thin, and the leaching of the plastic into the water happens so quickly.
Okay.
I have some of those big. I think for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
So I need to throw them away and refill again.
Are they plastic or are they glass?
And the one you put in.
No, you should be okay. You should be okay. Yeah.
And the food and the cans in the garage,
I would take a look at the expiration date and see. If it's getting close, I would throw them away and start new, but they should be okay. In the can, it should be all right.
Okay.
Yeah. So, oh, I didn't go over medical, sorry. Medical. So some have routine medical supplies that they use, some routine prescriptions. You may want to make sure you know where your, have on hand your doctor's office information, prescription information for eyeglasses, batteries for hearing aids, all kinds of things like that. Always have it extra. So anything that you might need to use in an emergency, a small medical supply kit, a small repair kit would be helpful. So in terms of pets, we can't forget our beloved pets: food, water, medicine, collar with an ID tag. If you are in a position where you have to take your pet to a shelter, they will not take the pet without proper ID and a collar. And if you have to leave the animal there, like the lead animal shelter will shelter animals in an emergency. In order to recover your animal, you have to have some sort of ID and proof that you are in fact the owner. So something to consider. Always have a crate or a pet carrier on hand, because again, you can't just take them to a shelter for people. They will not take pets in the shelter for people. We will set up a companion shelter for the pets, but again, you can't just take them and carry them in there without any kind of identification or without a carrier that they can be in. Their favorite toys, obviously, and anything else that your pet might need, especially if it's a special needs pet. Service animals are not the same. If you have a service animal, or your family member has a service animal, they are always, always, always allowed in the shelters. The health district is trained to know this. Red Cross is trained to know this. And Medical Reserve Corps, which are medical volunteers that help out in shelters, all are trained to know this. If you have proper shelter animal identification on your pet, they are always allowed in the shelter with you. So one of the first things that's going to go down in an emergency is communications. And so we have to do everything that we can to make sure that you all stay informed in an emergency. Emergency warnings usually come out of local government, like the county or the cities. If you don't know whether you live in an incorporated city or unincorporated Clark County, you should find out, because that will be the agency that you're paying attention to for those warnings. Official public warnings will come to you via text, through your cell phone, through your landline, or potentially through email. You will be receiving directions from first responders about evacuation and shelter locations. You'll be getting potentially information over websites over the internet, television, radio, and social media. How many people are on Facebook or Twitter or some other social media? Just a few. Okay. I know a lot of people realize that social media can be a real time suck, and you're not necessarily a fan of it, but during an emergency, it is very helpful to get up to the minute information about what's going on in an emergency. It's not the best way to communicate with government to say, my house is flooding, I'm in the northwest part of Clark County, please come help me, is not going to necessarily get you help faster. But knowing that an area in general is flooding and we need to pay attention to it, that is helpful. I am the recovery liaison during an emergency in our department, and I get a lot of amazing information from area Facebook pages, like Facebook page that Laughlin has for their residents. Moapa Valley, same thing. They have a lot of flooding throughout the year, and a lot of people post very valuable information, and I'm able to help them and get them recovery information, get pictures from them about what's going on at their house, and get them the help they need. Of course, anytime there's an emergency, looking on Facebook for help is not the place to go. Just call 911 and someone will come out and help you. But if you're trying to find out information about shelter services, where do I take my pets, where can I get food, how can the Red Cross help me, that is a great place to get quick information. And this is the Southern Nevada Community Preparedness app that I was showing, that I was telling you about earlier. The little EM emblem there is the icon, is the logo for that app. So when you go into the Apple Store on your phone, just look for that. Put in Southern Nevada Community Preparedness in the search, and that little emblem will come up. Click there and get yourself set up in it. Great thing about preparedness is the whole family can be involved. Every family is different and has special needs, so plan for those. Look at all locations where your family is during the week, school, work, daycare, and develop a plan that helps figure out how to bring everybody together in a safe place. Have your child make their own kit. The Red Cross has this wonderful program that they do with, or I think it's 3rd and 4th graders in school, called the Pillowcase Project. And they help kids decorate their own pillowcase and put all of their favorite things that they would want to take with them in case of an emergency. Their favorite book, their favorite toy, their favorite little stuffed animal, whatever it is, to take with them extra pair of clothes that they can choose. And it's a great way to get kids into emergency preparedness, and you can do that right in your own home. And emphasize again, designating alternate meeting sites and determining ways to share information. So maybe you develop a code word for your family. Maybe you develop everybody knows the phone number of an aunt or an uncle or a family friend that you would contact in case of an emergency. It's also good to develop a contact outside of the area, because our phone systems might be very bogged down. You may not be able to call each other, but you may be able to call a relative in Phoenix or LA and tell them what's going on, and then that's your call-in place, because our circuits may be so jammed that calls can't even make their way around in our community, but strangely they can get out to another place. So we talked about practicing and maintaining the plan. Test your plan at least once a year. Pick a holiday or pick Great Shakeout Day. This year is October 20th. That is a chance for everybody across the globe to practice earthquake preparedness. So that's a day that a lot of people pick to practice their plan. So look for gaps and things that you may have missed. So maybe the meeting place that you picked turned out to be not an easy place to get to, or maybe that neighbor that you picked to be locating in front of doesn't want you to do it for whatever reason. Or maybe the grocery store that you picked is no longer in business from the last time that you looked at your plan, and you have to come up with a plan B. So think about this. That is also a good time on an annual basis to check your cans, check your other food goods, check your water. And think about, is your plan realistic? Can we actually make this work and come up with the best common sense plan for your family and yourself? So in terms of preparedness, it involves everybody in this room and everybody that you know. Begins with you and your household, begins with you and your workplace. It begins with you as a member of the community. If you choose to, or maybe you already do, volunteer for a nonprofit that helps during an emergency, like Catholic Charities, the Red Cross, Salvation Army, some other faith-based groups. All of these have preparedness plans. All of these have plans to help in an emergency out in the community. If that's something you're interested in, always looking for volunteers for that purpose. Another thing that you can do is make sure financially that you're able to recover. Make sure you understand what's in your insurance policy if you're a homeowner. We have information that I brought today that talks about flood insurance, and not everybody is automatically covered by flood insurance. And how the water gets in your house actually matters when it comes to insurance coverage. We have found that some insurance policies will cover if the flood comes from the street into your house, you may or may not have coverage. If the coverage comes from the sky, if the rain comes from the sky into your house, crashes through your roof, floods your house, maybe you're covered, maybe you're not. So be very clear as to what your insurance covers. If you are a renter, the homeowner of your home or your building may have insurance and should have insurance, but it may or may not cover your personal belongings. So take a look at purchasing renter's insurance if you don't already have it. Renter's insurance will not only cover your goods that you have, your personal items, your furniture, your clothing, your jewelry, but it also will cover having to relocate to another home if the one you're renting is damaged. It will help pay those expenses, and I've recently worked with some folks in Laughlin who had that happen, and luckily some of them did have renter's insurance, one unfortunately did not. And so they learned the hard way that what they thought they had covered due to the person's homeowner's insurance does not cover their personal belongings that were destroyed. So something to consider. Make sure that you can recover not only physically but financially so that after an emergency the impact on you would be much, much less. That's all I had in terms of presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions if there's some time.
I have one more.
Yes, ma'am.
My water, my bottles, we cover them with a black bag, plastic bag. We think that the light can damage the water, so is
No,
right
you
to
should
do
be
that
okay.
or
No,
not?
you're fine. Yeah, it's fine. No problem. Any other questions? Any comments? Any through your experiences? Do you have other suggestions other than what I've talked about from experiences that you've had? Yes, sir.
No other questions. I wanted to know what your thought would be about maintaining a power generator. I understand that a lot of people think about that. They don't think about how does it interface with my house? How do I throw the switch? And actually, I don't know. Most of the houses, is it possible to generalize about the houses around here? Can they be hooked up to the generator, or does the hookup not normally exist on the
No,
house?
you can, and a lot of people do. You can have a backup generator for an individual residence. So think about that. Talk to an electrician or go to Home Depot or Lowe's and talk to one of their experts. I know they do sell them, and see what you would need to do in order to have that as an easy hookup, that you wouldn't need an electrician on the spot, during an emergency, something you could do in advance.
When you throw the switch.
Yeah, you might have to upgrade your power box and do some other things. Yes, sir.
I happen to be an electrician, and one of the things to be careful of is don't impress the voltage onto the line coming into the house from the power lines.
Okay.
Because all transformers, all that equipment will work backwards, and you impress a very high voltage on the line. And that might be what's damaged. That might be why you don't have electricity, is the power line came down.
Okay.
So you're exposing the lineman to a high voltage. So they have disconnects on your house, isolation switches. So when you hook up the generator to your house, be sure it doesn't go anywhere else, just in your house. And so they have. So it's the best thing is to have an electrician or electrical contractor install that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's what we're recommending to whoever asked that question, just because we know that there is a risk and you can have unintended consequences. Thank you for that. Yes, sir.
Another thing, you could lose water, and I lived through a lot of typhoons over in Okinawa. And the first thing we did was fill up our bathtub with water.
I've heard that
Yes.
before. I was
You
going
use
to ask
that
about that, yeah.
You use that not to drink, but it's to flush the toilet.
Exactly. Great point. Great point. Thank you for mentioning that. I did forget to mention that. Yeah, if you can store extra water for those kind of purposes, sanitation, cleanliness, being able to flush toilets, there are a lot of how-to guides online for different tricks that you can do in your house, different techniques that you can do for safety, and you'd be surprised what you can turn into a toilet in your house if you had to during an emergency. But hopefully we never have the kind of emergency where you would have to be prolonged on your own for long periods of time without any assistance. And we do have a very robust community of volunteer organizations to help us with shelters. There are agreements with the county, with the Red Cross, with the school district to help with all those kinds of things. We're in a lot of talks with the major casino properties to help out during an emergency so that we can be as self-sufficient as possible. We're kind of a little island unto ourselves here in Las Vegas, 300 miles from any help. And so if we're cut off on our major highways and our railroad, it could be, quite a problem for us. So we have to know what all the resources are in our community so that we can know what we've got on hand to take care of ourselves at any given time. But we are working on it as the federal government recommends, as a whole community approach, so that we can make sure all of our 2 million folks and our 250,000 visitors at any given day are taken care of. So thank you so much for your time and attention. Really appreciate being here today.